Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Today, I'm joined with Chris Bruno, CEO and Director of the Fairfax City Economic Development. Thanks for joining me today, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Sandy.
As we get started, I always like to have our guests share a little bit about themselves and the organization. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Sure. So my name is Chris Bruno. I am the Director of Economic Development here for Fairfax City Economic Development. I have been in my role for the last 9 years, which is unbelievable to say out loud. Prior to that, I was Assistant General Counsel at the New York City Department of Small Business Services. And since coming here to Fairfax City, we've focused on rebuilding economic development and projecting our brand and image regionally, nationally, and internationally.
That's awesome. When were you last in Fairfax? You say come back.
I actually grew up here and went to high school here. And so I am very familiar with Northern Virginia and Fairfax City in particular.
Okay, that's funny. We did not talk about this. Did I tell you that I grew up in Fairfax County?
You did not tell me that. No.
I
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Great Falls. I went to Langley High School.
Excellent. I went to Paul VI High School, but played baseball all around the place. And so I've probably been to every high school baseball stadium in Northern Virginia.
Oh, that is awesome. I love it. I played softball until my sophomore year. Actually, I don't even think I did my sophomore year of high school because I had a little skiing accident during that winter. I thought I could handle black diamond. My knee could not handle it.
Sandy.
My knee could not handle it.
Yeah.
I haven't skied or played softball since then, coincidentally. But anyway, we digress, but that's what we do here. So now the Fairfax City and what you guys are doing. Obviously, one of the things that we have talked about and been working on a lot of, I'm very passionate about all things regional, and I think that particularly in the economic development space, people need to collaborate and think of their neighbors as partners instead of competition. So I'd love to hear the role that, the role that you're playing, and specifically in your organization in this broader Northern Virginia economy.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that. I actually look at our role as sort of being multi-layered, first locally to Fairfax City and our city economy, which we're doing a lot of work on, and then on our contributions on the second layer to the regional economy, which is our participation and involvement in the creation and growth of the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance, which, as you may know, I'm sure, that started in 2019 following the Amazon HQ2 process. All of the directors of economic development came together and said we really could have a greater impact if we were partnering on particular projects and initiatives. And so we came together and formed this Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance and currently serve as members of its board of directors. And I am lucky enough to be serving as its treasurer this year on the executive leadership team.
Said no one ever. I'm lucky enough to be the treasurer is a phrase you do not hear very often.
I don't know if sarcasm is coming across very well here right now.
I think maybe it is. But yeah. Talk to us a little bit about the goals of the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance.
Yeah, so the NOVA EDA is really important, again, for us as a small jurisdiction here in Northern Virginia. It allows us to associate with these larger jurisdictions, but specifically the NOVA EDA is focused on regional marketing, coordinated business attraction, site selection, research, and familiarization tours, all things that are very important for economic development agencies generally. But this allows us to approach our partners at the state and international partners to do this on behalf of the Northern Virginia region, which we think is a really special region that's second to none here in the United States. And so we are able to partner with our neighboring jurisdictions to continue promoting that. I do think it's important to also highlight that we as Fairfax City really benefit from our role and partnerships through the NOVA EDA, because it also allows us to then get the brand and the name and the conversation surrounding Fairfax City out in parallel with the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance in ways that we absolutely would not have been able to do prior to the creation of this organization.
Were you doing some of those things just on a much smaller scale, or really like couldn't even tap into it
No, we were
before?
always doing some of them, but it was really just a question of resources. At the time, one agency with just a few employees was probably not looking to go to international trade shows, conferences, and meetings. And now, in large part, because of our affiliation with this organization, we'll frequently have someone representing our interests and the interests of the region in Toronto or in Europe at a meeting, or various meetings and conferences across the United States as well. But definitely not things that jurisdictions like Fairfax City were previously doing. We now are able to do, along with the other smaller jurisdictions in Northern Virginia as well.
Let's kind of paint a picture. I think there are some listeners that are going to hear Northern Virginia and not think anybody is a small jurisdiction. Talk to us a little bit about, population size, density, things like that. What are we looking at how do we define small in this area?
Well, when you think of Northern Virginia, I think most people are typically thinking of Arlington County, Fairfax County, Loudoun counties. These are the big jurisdictions that people typically associate with Northern Virginia. However, because of how Virginia is structured, cities and counties are actually legal separate entities and politically separate entities as well. And so within those larger jurisdictions, you sort of have sprinkled throughout cities and towns. And from Fairfax City's perspective, we are an independent city completely surrounded by Fairfax County. So while our population of residents is 25,000, we are surrounded by a jurisdiction of over 1.2 million, which is really actually interesting because it means that we have a small resident population, but we need to be able to sort of punch way above our weight and provide big city services and provide big city marketing. And we tackle a lot of the same issues that these much larger jurisdictions face just because of our proximity to them as well. The other smaller jurisdictions in Northern Virginia would be the city of Falls Church, the city of Manassas, Manassas Park, and to a lesser degree, the city of Alexandria as well.
Fairfax City and Fairfax County, I'm sure that's never confusing. Everybody fully understands the jurisdictional differences and never calls you and thinks they're calling them, or calls them and thinks they're calling you, right?
Yeah, no, never happens at all. No, actually, this sort of element of consumer confusion happens a lot. And, for the most part, that's okay. But occasionally we get businesses that specifically want to come and locate to Fairfax City, or even specifically want to locate to Fairfax County, and they're reaching out to the wrong jurisdiction. So, it's kind of pushed us to have a really strong relationship with our Fairfax County EDA partners. It's one that I'm very grateful for, and hopefully we're able to contribute to that relationship in a way that they too are grateful for it. But it's really allowed us to partner together on some programs and initiatives with state site selection, and then of course through the Northern Virginia EDA as well. But yeah, it's fun because nobody knows where they are. We have some residents that don't know the distinction between the city and the county, and so it's kind of up to us to keep pushing our brand and brand recognition so that we can educate out to the business community what the distinctions between the city and the county are.
Yeah, I have told you that I'm a fan, become a basketball fan of George Mason University, and they made it, into March Madness, which was super fun to watch and experience, and that is in Fairfax City, correct?
Well, it's technically not in either, but it sits just on the southern border of our city. I know it doesn't make any sense.
They're so confused every day.
Yeah, no, and there's always another little twist to the story too. But the university and the city have a special connection that goes back to the founding of both the city and the university. And I may not be exactly accurate on the facts, but I believe my understanding, at least, is that the city, or the previously the town of Fairfax, dedicated some property to what would become George Mason University. And so we've always had this deep connection. We've renamed a couple of streets University Drive in the city. We have a number of student engagement opportunities. At certain points throughout the year, we'll have green and gold painted all over our intersections. It's really part of our push to become, a little bit more of the hometown for George Mason University. In fact, we've actually hired a tourism person, and we're developing a tourism division here within our economic development office. And one of the pillars of that person's portfolio is to actually deepen the ties between George Mason University and Fairfax City.
I mean, we could go onto a whole town gown, tourism opportunity. I went to Shepherd College. It's now Shepherd University in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. And my parents were living in Northern Virginia, as I mentioned, grew up in Fairfax County. And they ultimately, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, moved to Shepherdstown, kind of followed me there. And that relationship between universities, I can't believe I ever would compare Shepherd to George Mason. They're a little bit different in size, but they still have that environment, that vibe in a community, and that kind of sense of place, and what's going on, and people like the main streets. They like to be able to walk down. And
it's a really important relationship to cultivate. Earlier, you asked me about, sort of the advantages maybe of being a smaller jurisdiction, and we can pivot in ways and engage the university in ways that it's just harder for a much larger jurisdiction to engage with them on. We frequently have meetings between university leadership and city leadership. And from economic development specifically, we've really leaned into establishing a strategic partnership, both with what is known as Mason Enterprise, which is sort of their business development programs, but also the Costello College of Business, and specifically their academic centers, where we feel that we can provide an out-of-school opportunity for students to deepen their academic experience, while at the same time advancing some of our economic development goals.
I love that. I love that a lot. So I'd like to get back to, because I derail us in the conversations.
Okay.
But I'd like to get back to, maybe some of the opportunities of this, city, county, and of the same name, and how you embrace those opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah. Again, there are a number of programs that we do partner with Fairfax County on. One of them is actually happening on Friday. I believe it's called the Economic Development Summit, where people from our business investment team and their business research teams will get together and lead a conversation around all of the economic opportunity that exists here, not only in Fairfax City and County, but also in Northern Virginia. And then from time to time, we partner with them on much larger projects that are unique to what we would refer to as the two Fairfaxes. That are not necessarily programs that fit within the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance. So we're very lucky that we have all of these layers of partnerships. Some of them came by luck, some of them came by a lot of work and strategy, but we're lucky and we benefit from these relationships that we have specifically with Fairfax County and our neighboring partners.
That's awesome. I'm curious. My office is located in Frederick, Maryland, and we are in Frederick County. So I'm curious. We know that there are other jurisdictions that are like that have communities of the same name, or get confused or whatever. I'm curious if there are, I don't know, any stories or examples of things that have really worked. Advice that you would give others to collaborate and to differentiate themselves.
I think one of the things that is a unique opportunity for partnership for us here in Fairfax City is that we can work with our county partners and really highlight the difference between the county and the city. It's actually a little bit of like a healthy competition, right? And so we can hold ourselves out as being sort of the place that you can meet businesses depending on the scale of the business and where they are in their business lifestyle. Lately, I've actually really enjoyed talking to startups and entrepreneurs and saying, look, if you want to be in Northern Virginia, you do want to come to Fairfax City, we have the business support programs in place here where we can help you grow your business. And then look, I hope you stay here forever, right? But like then you have access to this regional economy that can really just power your business to different levels. Something else that we do, and it's not necessarily a partnership with Fairfax County per se, it's actually part of our relationship with George Mason University, is that we've worked with them not only to license our small business incubator to them, but we've also sort of worked out a way with them to co-locate some of these other business support facilities here in our economic development office campus. And that includes the Small Business Development Center, a couple of training programs, a number of opportunities that are available to small businesses here in Fairfax City, but all throughout Northern Virginia as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it when economic development can co-locate with an SBDC. I think that oh my gosh, it makes for a really strong relationship. You're filling a huge gap. Having those communications with your SBDC team can be really important. When I was way back when I was in economic development on a regular basis, we were fortunate enough to have, an SBDC advisor there physically located, in the office next door and, within our space or the cubicle next door or whatever. And it helped a lot.
I can't tell you how many times we have sent businesses down to our SBDC. There's also, a couple of technical assistance programs that operate out of there as well. And so, and also just being here in Northern Virginia, right? We obviously have a lot of government contractors, which I feel like we'll talk about in a minute. But, there are a lot of technical support programs available to them as well. And this actually seems to be the hub for that throughout all of Virginia and the entire state. So it's really good for us to have this as an opportunity here in Fairfax City, but it's a service that our programs can provide to all of Northern Virginia.
Yeah, so I want to maybe shift gears a little bit, although this is kind of where the conversation is going, as to some of this, attraction and retention and maybe some specific programs that you are working on. I know we at PPR have been fortunate to collaborate with you and support you in some areas, but I'd love to hear about some of the priorities that you're focusing on right now.
So within Fairfax City exclusively, we're really focused on supporting our various portfolio functions. And the way that our office is set up is that we have business investment, marketing, and public relations, and then programs. And then within programs, we also have tourism. And then we have one or two internal only divisions, mostly administrative. But thinking about business investment, right? That's your typical business attraction, retention, and expansion. And within that category of programs, we've developed a couple of things that really help fill our commercial and retail vacancy spaces and support small businesses. And that's really one of the reasons why we have not only historically low vacancy rates here in Fairfax City, but some of the most competitive vacancy rates in all of Virginia. So some of these programs that we've launched and we've piloted, and I think we will be now permanently launching, are known as, we love acronyms in economic development. So we've got our lease incentives for Fairfax tenants, or LIFT. We've got something called our Facade and Interior Improvement Grant Program, or FIG. And then we're constantly launching other programs like the Fairfax City Business Marketing Grant and Women's Entrepreneurship Grant Opportunity Programs. Again, these all complement some of the other things that we do. Our Mason Enterprise Center is our city small business incubator. And then we also partner across city divisions as well to provide services that we believe provide an economic benefit to businesses and residents living or operating here in the city. So an example of one of those things would be our free bus system, right? We want to make sure that people are able to easily connect to employment opportunities throughout the city or the region. So our bus system goes back and forth between George Mason University, but also our Vienna Metro station on the Orange Line.
Very cool. Do you have a business improvement district or anything like that you collaborate with in the city of Fairfax?
I am really happy you asked me about that because I am an enormous fan of the business improvement district model. And knowing that they take a long time to establish and set up and administer, we in Fairfax City have actually taken sort of the initial steps in the business improvement district conversation by forming and then continuing to support the Old Town Fairfax Business Association, which is a merchants association that is representing and marketing and providing limited services to the merchants in Old Town, which is a geographic area. It's the cultural and social heart of our city. It also happens to be the most walkable piece of our city where a lot of development interest is occurring right now. And a lot of people are starting to move into and live. And so we've worked to form this merchants association that can help us create a place where people want to be, which is also, I keep returning to George Mason University, but it's walkable distance to George Mason University, promoting that sort of hometown feel for the university students as well.
That's great. That's great. Yes, I do love a good downtown. It's so good. And when the merchants can come together to identify and put resources to solving their, some of these problems and connecting with city government can become the best of all worlds.
I have been really impressed with the Merchant Association leadership and how the merchants themselves have stepped up and taken on program development. The Asian Festival on Main is an enormous program, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks, and that brings many thousands of people to Old Town Fairfax, and it connects them directly with the Old Town businesses. It's really a wonderful event. I highly recommend it if you happen to be in town that week. But it complements a sort of calendar of events that both the city and the Merchants Association program throughout the summer and winter months. It's a fun place to be when they're running their programs.
Sounds like lots of tourism activity and opportunities here just happening naturally.
We have a lot of tourism potential. And I'm really excited that we have a new tourism employee who's now she's building the strategy for tourism right now. And we're building that into our strategic work plan as well.
Well, and there are certainly lots of opportunities with the state of Virginia and their tourism activities and support with grants and initiatives, things. So
Yes, absolutely.
the state does lean in heavily in that space. So I'm curious and kind of touched on this a little bit, but any best practices or things that you would like to share with some of our listeners that might also be working in other smaller or similar community environments, some things that they could learn from you?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we have found that has been very successful is leaning into our strategic partnerships, whether that's with the university or Northern Virginia Community College. And if I'm being really honest, our partnerships with academic institutions and higher education institutions have been so successful that we've sought to replicate them just beyond Fairfax City as well. So we obviously have our relationship with George Mason University. I mentioned earlier the Costello College of Business and the academic centers where we can take marketing students or real estate professionals from their programs and actually task them with developing a plan for under or underutilized land here in the city and proposed development projects. But we're also working again with Mason Enterprise to administer and run our small business incubator on our behalf. Beyond that, we're working with Northern Virginia Community College, which is such an enormous asset to this region. We recently launched a program called Upskill Fairfax City, where any resident of the city and then any employee of any city business can sign up for tuition-free programs and certifications on our website, which I think is just like one of the coolest things ever. And it's also received a really positive response, both in the press, but also from residents of the city as well. And then, sort of growing on the success of those two partnerships, we've recently launched an international partnership with John Cabot University in Rome, Italy. It's one I'm particularly excited about, but it really allows us to extend sort of our office internationally into the European Union and allows John Cabot and its students to serve as a base for market research for us and connections to European, but specifically Italian companies, which have a really big interest in gaining U.S. market exposure. So it's been an exciting project that we've been working on. We've been treating these students as if they're extensions of our office. They've been doing research. They're developing some marketing collateral for us. They will travel here to the United States. I believe in May, they will present to our board of directors. And then, we're going to grow this project and hopefully eventually connect with some Italian businesses looking to come to the United States. That has actually been so successful that we're starting the conversation of how to replicate that with other countries, both in and out of the European Union as well.
Wow, I love that. And we talked with Jonathan Aberman in the first episode of this season. So if people want to learn a little bit more about that particular program and what's going on, they can listen to that episode. I'd love to dive in a little bit more on some of these. You just mentioned several. I mean, I just wrote down workforce development. We're supporting your residents. You're supporting the student population. I hear upskilling, with Northern Virginia Community College and, intern and job opportunities for George Mason students and beyond. Workforce development is not always part of the economic development team. Is that, somebody that you have in-house? Is that a partnership? Talk to me a little bit about how that is administered within your organization.
Seems to be shifting a little bit across the region lately. When I started here, it was not really something that the economic development agencies picked up. And then I think we had this realization over the last several years that we have some of the highest educated and most capable workforce and an enormous talent pool that I think other cities and regions would honestly they'd kill for. And so we've started leaning into that by developing some programs around that asset as well lately. On the regional level, our Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance now has a subcommittee devoted to marketing to talent and to employers who are, thinking about moving to an area and worried about who they will hire. That's not really a concern for businesses coming here because it's such a talent-rich community. And on the more micro local level, we have that same conversation here because of our direct connection to the university, which is just honestly pumping out probably more research than any other university in Virginia. And I would I don't know the exact numbers, but I would put it in the top percentiles of research across the country. And then, we also just have phenomenal graduates coming out of the business school that are looking to make connections with companies based here in Fairfax City or slightly over our border in Fairfax County as well. So anytime we can develop a program that connects recent graduates or people looking for employment to businesses, that in a weird way can be turned into a business attraction tool for us as well. So we're kind of attacking it from both angles here. There's not yet a dedicated person in my office for workforce development, but we all kind of dabble in workforce development because we know that it is such a critical piece of some of the programs that we're building and the success of what we will do here in Fairfax City.
Feel like I'd be remiss. It's March of 2025. What types of programs, activities are you doing to support some of the federal workers that have been impacted over these last several weeks and months?
Yeah. So, it is a tough time right now in federal contracting. I think what we're working on the Northern Virginia scale right now is trying to really understand the impacts of some of the federal layoffs that are happening right now, both from federal government employees, but also contracts that are potentially canceled, by the current administration. And what we will do is, we'll try to better understand the challenges that we're facing. And then as things begin to shift, I think we're all pretty confident that, as maybe the staffing levels of the federal government change, at some point, contractors will need to step in again to perform those functions for the federal government. So we look at this as a challenging time, but not a permanent time. And it kind of comes and goes in waves. For the employees that are now re-entering the workforce, we're really encouraging them to go to a website that we have partnered with the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance on. It's called workinnorthernvirginia.com, I believe. And what we are doing there is connecting our regional employers to list their jobs there, and people who are job seeking can go there as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's ever changing, and I'm always hesitant to ask the questions in something that won't air for a few weeks as we
Yeah.
record and do these things. But yeah, I don't see this challenge being solved, this problem being solved in the next couple of weeks. But
I don't see the concern is real and valid and will probably exist for a while. But some of the programs that we're building now and have already established are, they're kind of evergreen in that they will adapt to whatever the challenges is in a few weeks, right? So this Work in Northern Virginia website is happened before these changing levels of government contractors and government employees, and we will keep supporting it after the fact because it's just a good thing to have as an asset and a tool for all of us here in Northern Virginia.
Isn't that really kind of the definition of an effective program or tool, is something that doesn't solve your problem just for today, but you can dust it off, or it's ever going
I
and
like to
ever
think so,
evolving.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, cool, interesting. Um, Anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today? Is there anything that you're like, oh my gosh, I hope Sandy asks me about this other thing? Anything in particular, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy, for asking me that. One of the things I think about when I think about how a small city economic development agency can be really effective, it's that you've got to show and talk about your value. And I don't think it's safe to assume that anyone's just going to know. I think you need to talk about your success when you have it, and you can kind of start building some momentum because we have had some serious wins here in Fairfax City with Fairfax City Economic Development, and we've really been able to show the value to our internal stakeholders, which are our mayor, city council, and city partners, and some of our external stakeholders as well. And we've been able to do that by really emphasizing, the growth of our own brand, the presence of our social media, and honestly, we have a public relations person who's on board now, who's really cultivated some important relationships in the news media and TV media as well. So, we're kind of taking an maybe unconventional approach, but we're taking some risks and they're paying off. And a lot of that is because we're talking about some of the exciting things that we're doing, and we're excited to talk about them as well, which is always wonderful.
I 100% applaud you for that. I always say that economic development should not be a community's best kept secret. And we've got, it's funny. I'll send you a little. We did, a little tea bags. We did some PPR branded tea bags where we're spilling the tea on economic development and telling people about your, let us help you tell your story. Because oftentimes, economic developers, we're really good at doing the work, but sometimes we are not very good about telling our stakeholders or other people in our community that we're here.
The marketing piece is the marketing and public relations piece is so important. And, I think a lot of people get into economic development because they love local government and they're into public service, and that the marketing PR piece is not necessarily always front of mind. But once you start growing that piece, you see how valuable that is, both in securing additional resources, but ultimately in spreading your program so that you can have the greatest impact possible.
Yes, I agree.
I felt like you would.
Yeah. So, as the listeners on the podcast know, that my last question is always to ask people, as the name dictates, EDO Breakthrough. What was your EDO breakthrough, Chris?
Yeah, it's actually timely that you're asking me this. It's like March of 2025, and I was sitting here reflecting about 5 years ago, and I think our aha breakthrough moment was our ability to pivot quickly from typical economic development work to recovery and support work during the height of the pandemic. We developed a program called Fairfax City Reconnected. And through that program, we had 5 subcategories, one of which was the typical outdoor dining thing. And then, distributing PPE and safety standards. But an important piece of that was really how we connected with the city's business community. And even though this is now 5 years later, we were really able to establish these important relationships with several city businesses that we've grown, and we've been able to now leverage into growing the services that we provide here in Fairfax City Economic Development. And that's really, when I think about it, the turning point for when we went from a really small economic development agency to, we're still small, but we're less small now. We're probably like a small to medium size office. We've grown a business investment division. We've moved out of City Hall. We've developed dedicated programs and established this public relations division that I mentioned earlier. And now we really have momentum on our side. So we're going to continue doing a lot of great things, but a lot of it stems directly from, how we were able to react and support our business community during the pandemic, and how we've used that as a foundation for bigger and better things.
I love that. I think that that's beautiful, and it got me thinking about maybe another podcast, kind of a 5 year reflection back, and yeah, maybe I could talk with a couple of different economic developers that have had that, how our work has changed in the last 5 years, and the work that we are doing, I think you're right. It feels a little bit more impactful. And maybe it's because it's not all focused. It's not nearly as focused on the really big wins anymore. It's, every job, every piece of investment, every dollar really matters.
It's interesting that you put it that way. I mean, a lot of people took that time to, they were either left their job by choice or they were, unfortunately laid off. But they also took that time to start their own businesses and to really sort of flex their creative muscle. And some of those new businesses at the time needed support. And now those new businesses are flourishing and growing. And it might be a good time to check back in with them and do a little bit of a pulse check.
I think that's a great idea. Well, thank you very much. I know we could sit here and talk all day, but we do try to keep our podcast to a reasonable listening opportunity. But so thank you to our listeners who have been here today. Chris, thank you for everything that you're doing in Fairfax City. And thank you for joining today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. Thank you for having me.
The EDO Breakthrough podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.